Okay, here we have a hand where I have King Queen in the small blind. It turns out to be a blind battle. And I'm happy with this hand, like calling it out of position because this person was three betting me pretty relentlessly in blind versus blind situations. They're generally on the tighter side, but I know, but I do expect like King Jack and King 10 and stuff like that to be three betting me, as well as, pairs like tens and jacks. So I don't think I'm in that bad shape. Plus, because I'm awesome, I'm gonna outplay them after the flop. So it's gonna be pretty great. Now notice this was a relatively tight player, and they're gonna play into he is gonna play into my hands on the flop. So let's just take a look-see. As I said, it's blind versus blind, and I raise my normal raise, which probably should be a little bit bigger, but I'm lazy, so I just hit the pot button, and I get re-raised to 18, so I call. Well, you see what I do, but let me talk about why. The flop is King 9-6 rainbow. Okay, it's blind versus blind. I've called a re-raise with King Queen. Once the flop comes King 9-6 rainbow, I've decided already that I'm stacking off. Like, they could have he could have ace king, or aces, or pocket nines, or really anything that beats me. I don't care. It's a situation in which, like, I have a hand that's at the upper end of my range, and I'm gonna stack off with it. Once I've made this decision in my head, now the important thing comes in finding the best way to stack off with it that maximizes my value. Now, like I said, King Queen is, a very strong hand for my range, but most of the reason it's strong is because a lot of his hands, aren't that strong. Like, on this board, like a lot of his range that I'm gonna get value from is tens, jacks, and queens. And then, of course, as I said, it's a blind battle. I think that he was repopping me pretty light a lot of the time. I think that he's gonna be able to bluff me. Now, you might think to yourself, well, if you think that a lot of your value comes from bluffing, why on earth would you lead into this person? Well, I'll tell you why. A lot of the times when people lead into you, or if you lead into someone in a re-raised pot or on such a dry board, it looks pretty weak to most people. Because I think that it usually is weak. When someone leads into me on this board, I definitely assume they're weak. I might not raise it if I'm bluffing, but I'll probably float it a lot of the time because I don't expect them to have a hand that they're happy stacking off with. And that's because the way most people play a hand like mine is they check and let this person bluff. There is merit to checking. Obviously, they're going to fire a c-bet with all their range, and I get that c-bet. The problem is, though, once I check on this board, if I call, I think they're done bluffing. Like, they're going to figure out that I probably have a king a lot of the time. Or I could check raise, but then if they don't have a better hand than me, they're probably not going to continue. Maybe if they have pocket jacks, they might, bet and call a raise, but, their bluff, their hands like, 10 jack suited or whatever, they're not going to call a big raise on this board. So I look at my options and I say to myself, if I check here, I give away the strength of my hand. This is a similar situation to, in regular pots when you lead into someone with a big hand because, on a dry board because, like in a regular raise pot, if it's a multi-way pot, because like if you check, you're worried that if you check raise or check call, it's gonna make your hand seem really strong. It's a similar situation. So I'm just, I don't want my hand to seem too strong, and I also check raising, while it doesn't seem incredibly strong, I don't think it puts them in position to put a lot of chips in the pot. However, when I lead, I think some of the time the person's going to give up with like an ace queen or an ace jack type hand, and that's unfortunate because I don't get that c bet. But you'd be surprised at how often like a tight player decides to wake up and make a bluff at you because it's a blind versus blind. People are heated in those kinds of situations, and people don't like being led into, especially not in 3-bet pots when they have the initiative. I know I don't like being led into on 3-bet pots. So I decided to go ahead and lead in. I bet, not a huge bet, once again, 26 into 36, probably on the bigger side. I wanted it to seem bluffier, which is why I bet a little bit bigger than I needed to. But then, obviously, because we're showing it to you, it works out brilliantly. That person raises, it's like almost a min raise. And I call, and I've got about a pot-sized bet left. The turn's pretty perfect for me. It's a 6. So, of course, I check now because, obviously, like, if they have ace-king or aces, once again, I'm stacking off. But I've given them the rope now to play for all of their chips in some way. And so, let's see what happens. He actually winds up going all in. And I call. He's got ace-queen off. I mean, this entire hand, if I had checked, I would have made $26 or whatever, his C bet would have been. He might have actually checked behind because he's got ace queen high. Probably not. He probably would have made a bet to get me off a small pair. And maybe he even would have double barreled if I checked twice, although I doubt it because it's a king high rainbow board. I doubt that he's going to fire two barrels. But even if he does, I make, a half stack or something like that, $25 and then $70 or whatever his bet sizes are. But the way I played it, I bet into him and induced a raise, so then he was bluffing a lot more chips into me. And I find that doing, this kind of a thing works out really well until people catch on to you. But then the cool thing is once people catch on to you, it winds up being a really cheap way to either bluff in re-raise pots or to find out if your hand is good. But like I said, I would never lead with like pocket eights to see if they were good here. Unless I had a long history of betting with hands like this and then calling raises and things like that. Once you establish that history with someone, then of course you're going to have a lot more fold equity on your leads, and you can use that to your advantage. But for now, it's just a pretty awesome way to get value when you are out of position in a 3-bet pot.